WVIZ TV 25, Cleveland.
This is Ohio Educational Broadcasting.
Altitude, velocity, light, 8.5 down, 220 feet.
There are all sorts of reasons why we should want to explore the universe. That's one of the beauties of it, that many people are involved in the enterprise for all kinds of different reasons. Some are interested in it just as a puzzle which they like to figure out, and others because they find the universe is beautiful, and others may be believing that they can make it pay off in economic terms.
30 feet down, 2.5.
But just a few of us may think it's a fun thing to do.
4 forward, drift into the right level. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle.
What drives me into taking a hopeful view of the universe is just that it looks fertile. It looks as though it is a huge virgin area, which is basically hospitable to life, but where life isn't there.
Status check. Command on intel.
And that looks to me like an extraordinarily exciting prospect, that life in the end will somehow take over the universe, that it's now confined to this little corner where we live, and there's that whole enormous realm waiting for it.
Telemetry in launch condition. Affirmative.
Mobility was, I like to refer to it as the Peter Pan mode. You could really just push off and move around.
It's very much like the sensation you get when you're skin diving or just floating around in the water.
These first-hand accounts of living in space are from the Skylab astronauts themselves.
Well, as far as working in zero gravity and moving yourself, it was a delight in comparison to 1G on the surface of the Earth.
Every evening, after dinner and all the work was done, we always had to take a trip or two around the water ring lockers or just go up there and free fly.
Personal hygiene-wise, it was necessary for us to perform up there about the same way it is here. We brushed our teeth, we combed our hair, we shaved, we washed.
We also found that we could have quite a bit of fun doing tricks and stunts that weren't possible here on Earth.
Contact.
Space belongs to no one nation.
We also have capture. Are you in the full shaking hands now?
Here, Soviet and Czechoslovakian cosmonauts train for their flight aboard Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 28. It all looks so familiar. The preparation. The launch. The television show. The waiting wives. And the triumphant return.
What happens to a rocket after they get up into space and they do what they're supposed to do?
Then it might, like, get burned up.
something really exciting is going to happen, or is happening right now. It isn't flying yet, and it's not going to take the place of a rocket, but it's going to be something like a rocket, and it's not going to be as expensive. Does anyone have any idea of what it might be?
Okay, all operators, good. I'll go for takeoff. GNC. Yeah. Fido. Go. Arrow. Go. Loki. Go. Network. Go. Echo. Go. FAO. Go. Homer.
A space shuttle?
AMR.
At launch, the reusable orbiter is mounted piggyback on a large expendable liquid propellant tank. The two solid propellant rocket boosters are also reusable.
Roger, you can start an 8-degree left bank now.
Orbiter is able to remain in space up to 30 days before it begins its glide back to Earth.
Okay, she's flying good.
Houston copies.
Up 203. 250, starting flare. Pro. Okay, 11 Alpha, pushing over. Ahead.
Start to turn to final.
We're thinking alike. Slightly got a little energy, look, Houston. I'm showing maybe a little high. Recommend 30% speed brakes.
We recommend 30% speed brakes.
Okay, board's coming open to 30. Okay, I'm running about 5 or 10 low on the backup and the prime both. HF 13 low. You got it, Gordo? I got your line. Okay.
Enterprise, you're cleared to start to turn.
Okay, starting to turn to final. You got your line. Straighten her up, Gordo, not quite the base. Okay. Slightly low. Okay. Just stop her here a minute. Standing by the gear. Okay, the gear is coming down at 270. Coming down, hard. Gear coming. Okay, 3 down. Gear's down. 240. 230. 220, lots of speed. Beautiful. 210. 210. 200. 195.
The shuttle will lift into space all sorts of objects and experiments.
Okay, 69.
Anyone will be able to book space. And the cost will be a tiny fraction of lifting each payload individually.
Yeah, it was too good a glider.
Once many different kinds of people are using space, we'll find that some of the most desirable, some of the most profitable, some of the most useful results were things that we never even dreamed of, but were just good ideas that somebody had, and now they actually had a way to get up there and check them out.
Pressurization complete.
One of the shuttle's first payloads will be Space Lab. Developed by the European Space Agency, Space Lab has 2 elements. A pressurized laboratory module in which scientists and engineers can work in a normal environment, and an instrument platform or pallet on which can be mounted telescopes, antennae, and other equipment or instruments requiring direct exposure to space. One of Space Lab's first tasks will be to explore the industrial uses of space.
Status check. Range safety arm light on.
Operating in the space environment provides freedom from the influence of gravity, a condition that has not been achieved on Earth for more than a few seconds. The ability to process uncontained liquids or melt by using very small forces could be extremely important. Uniform shapes, such as hollow glass microspheres used in thermonuclear fusion, can be produced easily. Experiments aboard Space Lab will test the effect of space on living organisms. Changes in bone and muscle immunology will be studied. Not all creatures adapt instantly to space. These disoriented fish could be used to study the effects of weightlessness on vestibular motion. Electrophoresis is a process which can separate different microscopic species. It's so delicate that on Earth it is defeated by the effects of gravity. Electrophoresis could lead to manufacture in space of large quantities of rare pharmaceuticals and medicines. microelectronic age is based on the growth of extremely pure crystals. In space, they can be grown with new purity, complexity, and beauty. The perfect vacuum of space, together with weightlessness, will spawn a whole new science and technology which will benefit all humanity. Only a tiny fraction of the sun's energy reaches the Earth. So far, the attempts at direct solar generation of electricity have been limited. Sunlight is filtered by the Earth's atmosphere and obscured by clouds. Solar arrays occupy large land areas. In space, sunlight is pure, and there is plenty of space.
I have a crisp, complete light.
Let me show you how a solar power satellite works with this simple model. We are in orbit around the Earth, and we're selecting an orbit where the sun shines continuously through most of the year. We have solar panels which are able to convert solar energy directly into electricity. The electricity is fed to microwave generators forming part of this transmitting antenna, which then sends a beam back to Earth, where we effectively and very safely convert microwaves directly into electricity.
The solar power satellite could occupy an area as large as 50 square kilometers. It would be fabricated in space from materials brought up by the shuttle.
Lots tagging secured. Affirmative.
A beam builder is a machine that would only work in the zero gravity of space. It's a small device that would take either a roll of aluminum sheet or some composite materials and would weave a kind of a web that would end up as a long beam extruded out into the zero gravity of space.
One of the most promising concepts for constructing large structures in space is the automatic fabrication of long, continuous truss members with a machine called a beam builder.
The basic point is that in space you could generate that beam of unlimited length without having to worry about its collapsing at some point from its own weight. You'd use a beam builder to build any kind of a large array that you have to build there, like an antenna or a solar power satellite. And in the zero G of space, you could make such an array as big as you like.
Range ready? Ready.
The mass driver is a big electric cannon. This prototype can accelerate a small payload to 400 kilometers per hour in a 40th of a second.
Once one has a mass driver reaction engine of the kind that we're developing here, one could use it anywhere in space to push a large ship or a large payload from one place to another. Typically, for example, one could go out to one of the nearer asteroids and use some of the mass of the asteroid to expel at a very high speed, higher than that of a chemical rocket, to provide a reaction thrust. And that would thrust the remaining part of the asteroid, which might well be 500,000 tons or so, to the vicinity of the Earth-Moon system, where one could use it then as the raw material for industry in space.
Switching command to internal.
Already on the drawing boards of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, are a series of satellites and vehicles designed to assist the human exploitation of space. Transfer vehicles to raise satellites to orbits unobtainable by the shuttle. Orbiting power extension packages which will allow the shuttle to remain in space for long stays. Space tugs, which can service satellites and other craft. manned orbital transfer vehicles to take crews from Earth orbit into deep space. NASA has also designed a series of space stations and colonies which would permit much longer stays, not only in space, but also upon extraterrestrial bodies.
It sounds like a very far-out idea, but really, there's no new inventions are needed to do any of these things, to put up a nice, comfortable living quarters in space. We don't need any new materials or new steels we don't already have. Big ones that's miles long, miles in diameter, which would accommodate people in a considerable degree of comfort, even luxury.
If you looked outward from your own home, for example, in Island 1, you would see a lot of vegetation around. There would probably be a lot of grass and trees and flowers, a fair number of fountains, small rivers, ponds, and so on. And you would notice a big difference because all of the food that you would eat would be grown naturally, would not have to be canned or frozen. Indeed, the great problem would not at all be finding people who would want to go into space to live and to work there. The great difficulty is that in the first space habitat, we can probably accommodate only 1 in 10,000 of the people who will want to go.
You don't have to wait to buy a lot on Island 1 just to make use of space technology. You're making use of space technology every day, and it's called satellites. There are literally thousands of satellites in the skies. Right now, there's communication satellites, there's navigational satellites, meteorological satellites, remote sensing satellites. When you make a long-distance telephone call, chances are excellent that that telephone call is being carried by a satellite. When you listen to the radio, well, more and more radio stations are getting all of their programs by satellite. If you watch television, they're also getting their programs by satellite, and if you happen to be watching a program that's coming live from across the ocean, the only way you can get there is by satellite. When you drive your car, the gasoline that you use may have been found by remote sensing satellites. The food that you eat came from farms where the farmers planned their crops based on satellite pictures. Navigational satellites now provide an accuracy down to fractions of a foot. It's incredible. Someday, all planes, boats, even cars will be navigated by satellite. Terrible storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, they're all being tracked by satellites now. Today, the only thing in space is satellites. But someday, with such satellites as Island 1, there'll be other things in space. Things like you.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting.
It must, of course, be noted that these uses, communications, navigation, remote sensing, and meteorology, are of prime importance to military organizations. The majority of satellites currently circling the Earth have military purposes. However, space programs have acted as a substitute for military activity, spawning a type of scientific and technological breakthrough which in the past usually occurred in time of war.
One is given one's allotment of weight and power. Every milliwatt is metered and doled out, and one mustn't exceed these very tight limits. And so there is a very great premium placed on miniaturization, boiling things down, doing things with very little weight and very little power. The developments in microelectronic technology, solid-state devices, particularly the very highly integrated solid-state devices like microprocessors, this has become the technology, really, which permits this kind of exploration, unmanned exploration, to take place.
It's been claimed that the Viking spacecraft is the most sophisticated machine human beings have ever constructed on this planet so far. Not only did it have to be able to get to Mars, which would have been a feat even if it was only an inert hunk of lead, but it had to be able to orbit Mars, photograph it from orbit, and in the event that communications, uplink as they call it, were severed with the spacecraft, if we could hear the spacecraft but the spacecraft couldn't hear us, the twin onboard computers on the Viking spacecraft were capable of flying a whole mission totally without human control. Spacecraft like Viking and Voyager have to make decisions on their own, because even at the speed of light, the time it takes for information to get from Mars or from Jupiter back to the Earth can be up to an hour or more. And if something happens, you want the spacecraft to be able to make a decision instantly, not to send back to Earth and say, hey, I'm in trouble, what do I do? You want it to be able to decide things like that for itself.
When we look at the future of the kind of exploration we do, we see that we are going to be sending our intelligence to space. We're going to be sending our machines. We're not going to send people to Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune, at least not in the foreseeable future until somebody develops a much better propulsion system than we have now. But we don't need to. Men are tool builders, and these are our tools. And we're sending our tools to do the exploration for us.
If you look at a planet like Mars, if you look at how much we knew about Mars when it was discovered back in prehistoric times, it was one bit of information. It was a red star that moved in the sky. By the time we built telescopes and Galileo and other astronomers began looking at it, it became a few bits of information, a kind of a murky red ball. By the time we started sending spacecraft to Mars, first the Mariner spacecraft and then the Viking, we were seeing Mars at a resolution of millimeters and inches. We were seeing the surface of Mars as clearly as you can see the surface of your front yard. That's an increase in information, an increase in bits of a factor of 1 trillion or more. What was moving? The spacecraft were moving, but information was moving. And information was moving with great sophistication. So in one sense, the age of information-gathering robots is here. They may not look like 3CPO or R2-D2, but they're certainly as sophisticated. And they'll get more sophisticated if we keep going on into space.
9, 8, ignition!
For all its discoveries, for all its sophistication, for all its benefit to humanity, the program of space exploration is now in trouble. Few projects are being prepared. Even fewer are planned. Perhaps the shuttle will rekindle a public sense of purpose and adventure in space. The shuttle will launch a telescope which will be able to see farther than the most powerful on Earth. In fact, 7 times farther. Freed from the shielding of the Earth's atmosphere and light pollution, human beings will be able to see more clearly into the universe than ever before. Two spacecraft will be sent toward Jupiter. They will use the gravity of the giant planet to hurl them back toward the sun. They will go over the sun's North Pole and then the South Pole. The mission is called Solar Polar.
Until now, all our ideas of the solar magnetic field and interplanetary space, what this is like in the region outside the solar equatorial plane, has been pure conjecture. And the objective of this mission then is to investigate the properties of interplanetary space, the particles there, the energetic particles given out by the sun, the cosmic rays that come into the solar system from the outer galaxy.
A new type of engine converts sunlight into electricity. This solar electric propulsion stage, or ion engine, will power a space probe that will fly by Halley's Comet and rendezvous with the comet Tempel 2. It will examine materials unchanged since the birth of the solar system.
4, 3, 2.
But what of the more distant future? Undoubtedly, human beings will follow their probes. Undoubtedly, restless imaginations will not remain content to linger in this tiny solar system, or even this small galaxy.
Life, when it spreads out in a new environment, always diversifies. But my expectation is that the universe is so large and so full of opportunities that when life goes out, it will very quickly find new ecological niches and will diversify in all directions, just as it did on this planet. And the human part in this, of course, is only a small part. It is life that is going to go out and turn the universe into something living, not just us. But it's quite likely that in the long run we shall also diversify and become many different species.
If we're the only life form in the universe, that's very interesting. If, on the other hand, the universe is filled with life, that's also very interesting. In a universe filled with life, we can imagine an interstellar or even intergalactic communication system that pools and shares a heritage of billions of years of universal or galactic history. There might be a kind of galactic information system, a kind of galactic who's who computer system, broadcasting on various beacons at various wavelengths. And maybe now and then, when a society like ours becomes technologically advanced enough to search for and detect these signals, they find that there's a legacy in space waiting for them, a legacy of the science and philosophy and culture, art forms, history, sports, games, who knows what, of civilizations thousands of years away that maybe are now even gone, but who have left a token of their existence in the form of information traveling through space. But suppose that's not the case. Suppose we are, for whatever reason, the only one. Then that means that the only place in the universe where matter has achieved the state of knowing about itself, where the atoms know about the atoms and know about the stars, is right here. Then we're the only place where matter has achieved that sort of organization. If so, then our own terrestrial global information network, our growing global computer encyclopedic net, is the galactic computer. It is the repository of all that's known by consciousness in the universe. If so, that makes the obligation we have to preserve our world and not destroy ourselves even greater, because we're the only place where anybody has an inkling of the story. We're the only place where anybody knows about the galaxies and the stars and wonders about life elsewhere. So either way you cut it, there is a galactic computer. Either it's bigger than we are and we're going to plug into it, or we're it. And it's our responsibility to keep it growing until someday, through us, it may in fact embrace the rest of the galaxy.
Ignition! Main stage!